Welcome to the Circa Survivor show for NFL Week 8. My name is Spencer. I am joined by the lead analyst over at Pool Genius, Jason Lisk, and we are running through your Survivor strategy here for week number 8. It was another high advancement rate last week. We saw almost every entry get through. Another 90+% of entries made it through last week. So we got a couple double-digit favorites on the board here, Jason. How are you doing, and how are you looking at this week 8 slate?
Doing good. Yeah, this one I think is fairly simple for the most part if you have the Colts. They are limited 39%. That's because back in week 5, they were one of only 2 teams that had any amount of popularity that won that week. If you recall, it was them and Detroit winning. And then that was the week Arizona lost to the Titans. That was the week the Rams lost on Thursday Night Football. Bills lost. There's somebody else I'm missing that lost that week as well. But we had several that ended up losing. I know Seattle lost a small amount. It was just everybody else. And so even though the Colts were like 19% in that week, as it turned out, they ended up making up a large percentage of the survivors. And so that impacted this week. Because now the only people that have available probably got through with Detroit, maybe a few on some other teams like Minnesota that week, I think, but over the London game. So like less than half the pool have them available, 39%. We're setting the number at 32%. That's over 80% of entries that have them available using them. Could it go just above that? Yeah. Do 100% of people in this world agree on anything? No. And so I can't say 39, nor would I, because I'm trying to put a number that is both reasonable above and below. But the deal is the Colts are a plus EV play, and you're protected in that. They're a 2-touchdown favorite. They can't get steamed up like Green Bay a couple weeks ago to 55%. So you're kind of protected. And so if you make the pick, you're just saying, I'm going to take the biggest favorite. I'm protected. It's a positive EV play, and I'm moving on, right? And so I think most people will do that. Now there is a case for saving them, and I'll quickly present that case. This is the best spot by win odds, but if nearly everybody's used them, they're going to be very low owned. And if you think this Colts are actually still undervalued by the market, I mean, they're 6-1 and they've been covering the spread, and it is a possibility that we just are underestimating how good this Colts team is. There's going to be spots late in the year. That week 17 spot in a really tough week at home against Jacksonville is one clear example. And they are now tied for our top win odds in that week. And they're not going to be high owned. And so you could roll into a week like that. And this contest will go through all 18 weeks with a very low owned Colts team that could be the nuts in terms of win odds. Could be. Certainly not guaranteed, but could be. And that's a high value spot too. So anyway, that's an argument if you have some ability to diversify and save them on at least an entry to consider. But I do think for most people, the Colts are the play.
Yeah, and you're talking about that 17B slate, which is, am I right in that? Is that the second half of the Christmas slate there?
It is, but it's I'll pull it up here on our grid just so we can show it. It is the second half of the Christmas, so it's basically 1 week. And these numbers have changed slightly because we didn't have anybody at 7%. Now Tampa and Miami have gone up because of Miami, or Tampa and Indy have gone up because Indy's continued to look better and Miami's continued to look worse for Tampa. And then third is also another highly used team, Seattle. So my pick estimates for that week, I actually have like San Francisco against the Bears is one of the more popular options. I have Cincinnati potentially as a popular option of around 15%. That number's kind of splitting the difference on if Burrow comes back, because I do think it's in play. And we'll talk about Cincinnati here. I think the fact that they beat Pittsburgh increases the likelihood that we see Burrow late in the year. So I do think there's some chance Cincinnati's in play that week. But anyway, it's a tough week. And like if I look at the EV estimates right now, higher EV then more variance. But that assumes that very few, everybody that has them left will save them for that week and pick them. And it's only at 6%. And so it's not a high ownership spot, and you're probably going to get a high EV if Indian is in fact close to a touchdown favorite that week, 6-7 points.
Yeah, and if you're looking at the screen right now, this is our Circa Survivor data grid, and it's one of many tools available to premium members who purchase our Circa Survivor product. We also have some free tools that help you track your entry in Circa Survivor and look at different paths. But this one really digs deep into the numbers, shows you, as Jason's showing you right now, EV for future weeks, win odds for future weeks that we go through and adjust the models for. Like Jason said, some of these are adjusted for injuries and coming back from injuries later in the season, potentially. So we do all that work, and you'll see that throughout the episode here. We keep referring to the Circa Survivor data grid. But if you want access to this and to connect your entry to it and see all the optimal paths, season planner tools, everything like that, you can do that. Click the link below. You can also get a free 3-day trial to it if you just want to check it out for 3 days for this week. See how all the things work behind that. And then on top of that, Jason writes a Circa Survivor strategy article each and every week that will be linked below as well. That one is for premium members also. So definitely check that out. So as we look at this data grid for week number 8, we talked about the Colts. We talked about them up top. And if you have them available, you're probably going to use them. Most are. There's some scenarios where maybe you want to save them if you're planning ahead, but they do present as a plus EV play with that limited availability to the field. So if you don't have the Colts available or you're not picking them, where do you go? So you can see here, Atlanta is our second most popular. Do you think Atlanta is a fine play at that popularity, or are you looking elsewhere if the assumption is that they're going to get picked at 25%?
That's very borderline, and it's just very entry specific, right? It's I don't think there is an ideal pick outside of using Indy.
Yep.
I think they all have arguments for and against. I think with Atlanta or Cincinnati, those are obviously the picks people will gravitate towards to save future value. They have future value. Cincinnati is a little more variable. I think people may disagree with me on this, but I do think that it's definitely in play that Joe Burrow is back by like week 15, 16. He's more likely to be so if Cincinnati's in the mix, but the way that AFC North looks and Baltimore's at 1-5 is there's a good chance they're live, especially now that they have the head-to-head win over Pittsburgh, the one team that's over 500. They just need to stay near 500. And if they can play and if they get this win, that really helps. And so they don't have to like go on a huge winning streak. They just need to be near 500 come post Thanksgiving. And I think we're going to hear that Burrow's coming back, and then they're going to be favored in some of those late matchups. But that's not certain. That's not certain. Atlanta has some spots too. None of these teams are unusable. I think these are all teams you're probably going to think about using throughout the contest to win. And I think Atlanta and Cincinnati are going to catch a fair amount of those picks from people that want to save future value relative to the other options. There's not like, I know people use Cleveland as like a 2.5 point favorite. And so I don't think you want to dip down to those kind of picks this week where you're just taking a team. It's basically like a toss up. I don't know that they exist. It's the same. But B, there's just so many options. Like, you're getting so many teams at 6 points or better that I think you find the one you like.
Yeah, and you talked about Cleveland last week. Some people snuck them through as a 2.5 point favorite. That was literally probably the only week you're going to be able to pick Cleveland unless something comes up. I don't
they played
see
the Titans
those
in a
teams.
week. I think they'll be usable against the Titans in a similar type situation.
True.
But yeah, there's not going to be many where you're going to be like dying to use Cleveland. So let me see. They play the Titans. Oh, week 14, man, I have them projected with high popularity. So you may want to be off of them. That's a tough week, but we can talk about that in the future. I don't want to bog down the show with week 14 talk, but that is another week that shows up as a tough week in our study of the season.
Yeah.
Um,
And if you go back to that season view, looking at Atlanta, this is their highest projected win odds as far as we can see it right now. 76% win odds against Miami. This week, we have them around 70% in the future against Carolina. And then that's week 11 against Carolina. They're at the Jets week 13 and then week 18 versus New Orleans. Cincinnati, a little bit more complex, as you mentioned, due to the Burrow factor, and we don't know if he's coming back or not. But this projects as tied for their highest win odds of the season. And of course, the ones later in the year are dependent on Joe Burrow. But I think what a lot of people are looking at here is the sort of the call for Cincinnati and why you would use the Bengals. The Jets look so bad. The Jets look terrible. Cincinnati looks competent with Flacco in there. It's a home game for Cincinnati, and you can't bank on that Burrow thing. Like, this might
right.
be your shot to use Cincinnati, and if the Burrow thing's out the window, then you're glad you used them. You know what I mean? So I feel like Cincinnati could get steamed up a little because of that, especially the Jets don't really have a quarterback right now. Tyrod Taylor's
Yeah, I mean,
questionable as we're recording this on Wednesday afternoon, so just throwing that out there, that could be another variable that steams this lineup maybe a little bit.
there's more than a 0% chance that Brady Cook is the quarterback for the Jets on Sunday. I kid you not. Because the owner just trashed Fields.
Yeah.
And then Tyrod Taylor comes out and is identified as day-to-day with a knee injury. So I mean, everything's in play with the Jets this week. So yeah, this number could change. You can see that number change quite a bit. I will point out on my Cincinnati future projection, I'm not projecting 100% Burrow, right? So those numbers are probably middling it a little bit. And so if he actually plays, I think their win odds will be higher than that. So I'm kind of like putting a number there to kind of hold a spot like it could happen. So you want to kind of think about it. But it's going to be either side of that, depending on if he's back or not. So they actually have more future value if you tell me he's 100% back, and pretty much none if he doesn't come back, right?
Yep.
And so that's kind of the game you're playing. Is they could actually be way more valuable in Atlanta late, or they could have no value. And how do you want to play it? How do you want to play that? So yeah, I think both of those are definitely in play there. I think they're the type of picks. This Atlanta future value, kind of where they sit, is similar to teams like Houston in week 4, Arizona in week 2. And we saw those teams get into the mid to upper 20s, which is why I have Atlanta there. If the Cincinnati number moves up above a touchdown, I think they also push there, which could happen depending on the news we get. And so definitely keep an eye. And there's also the case that Atlanta and Cincinnati split votes, which is actually probably a good thing for picking one of them. If you're solo entry, you probably want a situation where I'm just picking the team to win. I'm not bypassing an opportunity where 30% of the pool's on one team, right? They're going to split votes on them. And then I'm just trying to get through by saving future value versus do I want to take a shot at a 30% of the pool being on one team?
Yeah, and I just want to point out that things do come up throughout the week. And as I mentioned, we're recording this on Wednesday afternoon. So definitely give us a follow over on X. I will pin that as a comment below, the handle to our X account. Anything that moves, line movement, projection changes, win odd changes, popularity changes, we put that all out on X. It's a great way to follow along what we're doing. And also, you can join our Discord if you have any questions. That is also linked in the description below. So, Jason, there's one more team I want to talk about, and then we can kind of talk about a cluster of teams in the same area. But I do want to pull one out, and it's the Kansas City Chiefs, who are now favored by 12.5 points. We have them projected around 4% popularity. Of course, they were very popular last week, got the job done against the Raiders. This is kind of an unexpected spot against an injured Commanders team. We give them 85% win odds. The question I have for you is, do you think more people could use the Chiefs to the point of like this popularity number gets steamed up from like 4% to say maybe kind of upwards of 10% or so. And then what happens to them as a pick if that does happen?
Yeah. So this is a tough one to nail down how people are thinking, right? Because this is an unexpected spot. Now, it's not the Rams unexpected on Thursday Night Football where it steams up and we are reacting in real time and people are putting their picks in. You have a week. This is a Monday night game. This is at the end of the week. But we know Daniels is out. This line has now moved to 12.5. This in look aheads, this was below a touchdown like just a week ago, right? Then the Chiefs look good again. Daniels is hurt. Line shoots up. And under a touchdown, you would have said the Chiefs are going to get no popularity, right? Because of the holiday factor, they were just used heavily. There's no way people are going to use them. Like, I think the question is how many now shift to them. I don't think they're a great pick if you're going to get 10% ownership on them. And I know some people think they'll get there. If you told me that's the case, I'd want to be off of for future value reasons. Because the more of the people that use them now, and we know that 35% of the pool just used them, or 35% used them, considering both last week and previous weeks. So now there's 65% available. Well, you've got Thanksgiving. You've got Christmas. You have a Thanksgiving slate, by the way, where there's some more uncertainty around Baltimore and Cincinnati. Cincinnati now looks a little better with Joe Flacco. So that, and we still don't know. We haven't seen Lamar Jackson play. So if you make that pick, you're kind of like jumping into the unknown there. Where Philadelphia hasn't looked as good as we thought at the start of the season consistently. The Bears have been a solid team. So that's probably not getting steamed up without injuries, but it could be a really popular spot and a low EV spot for the Eagles. The Chiefs are going to be a good EV play on both holidays, probably the best. And the more people use them this week, the better they become on those holidays. Christmas, I mean, think about this. You got Detroit, who was heavily used in week 5 to get through. You got the Chiefs. And then you've got either those projected underdogs, Denver and Minnesota, or you've got that Washington-Dallas matchup. And we're still projecting Washington as the favorite because we assume Daniels will be back by then. But we just saw Washington get their butts kicked by that same Dallas team. And would it surprise me if that game showed up as like a pick'em or like a big favorite? There's a possibility that like half the pool has to pick from that game. Man, I'd love to have the Chiefs in that situation and stay clear and let half the pool wipe themselves out, right? And so the Chiefs have a lot more value now, even on Christmas, Thanksgiving, now that they're our number 1 power rated team. And now that Washington kind of has some, I think, some very questionable, like, what's Daniels going to look like? He's now been hurt twice. Like, what's this team going to look like on week 17? What's that Dallas? I mean, do you trust Dallas with that defense against Washington? Do you trust Washington? I mean, there's lots of question marks. And so what I'm saying is, if Chiefs are under 50% available coming out of this week or anywhere close to it, they're going to be massive EV play on those holidays. And you also have a week 16 spot, by the way, where they play the Titans and where most people probably aren't going to use them. And so they could also be a high EV play there if you also had like Kansas City and Detroit, and you could switch it up. So lots of reasons to save the Chiefs, even more so than I think entering last week. I think things broke in such a way last week, not only with the Chiefs, but with the Bengals situation, with the Washington situation, where saving Kansas City looks like an even better play.
Yep. And then I want to, moving on from that, I think you wrapped that up pretty well, laying out all the scenarios for Kansas City. Are we in agreement that you probably don't need to use Tampa Bay or the Chargers this week, as both are sitting at a 3.5-point favorite, around 65% win odds? Do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, you're not getting down there. Tampa Bay, that line's moved down with injuries. I think there's just too many reasons to stay off Tampa when that line moves down. I had them projected a little higher popularity, but with the line move, I've dropped them because I think everybody will move off of them.
Yeah.
and gravitate toward Atlanta and Cincinnati if they weren't considering Indy or KC. And so, yeah, and I also think there's mostly a case for saving Buffalo. By the way, I think you could do it, but I think there's going to be better weeks to use Buffalo from a game theory standpoint in this contest if you still have them available, because they are also limited in their availability because they've, I think, been heavily used. Let me see what their number is.
Yeah, they're 40% available is all.
So only 40%, and there's several spots where you could consider them, including, by the way, Week 18 to close. I would have said early in the year Buffalo is the heavy favorite to win the AFC East. That Week 18 is very questionable to matter. But now with New England ahead of them and having the head-to-head win, this looks like it could more be a season-long thing where Buffalo's still competing through Week 18 to try to win the East is very much in play. So yet another spot I think I wouldn't have projected that now I would is a high-value play. So that just adds to the number of Buffalo spots. So I just think saving Buffalo when they're not a smash EV is probably the play. There will be other spots where I think your entry might need them more. There's too many, I think.
So 3 other teams then that are favored by nearly a touchdown or more in that 6.5 to 7.5 spread range that are within consideration this week, 72% win odds or so. We have the Baltimore Ravens, of course. Don't know about Lamar Jackson as we're recording this as of Wednesday night. We have Philadelphia Eagles, 74% win odds home against the Giants, who they just lost to a couple weeks ago in convincing fashion. And then we have the New England Patriots versus the Cleveland Browns, favored by a touchdown. How are you viewing these teams? I know we have New England with a little more popularity than the other two. I mean, do you lean towards one of the teams if you're going maybe a little contrarian, or are you just staying off this group in general? How do you view it?
I'm probably staying off Baltimore. I think the uncertainty factors and the fact that maybe they're valuable in Thanksgiving, maybe they're valuable in Week 12, and several other places probably says save them. Like, don't even mess with that situation. There's a lot of unknowns here. Philadelphia and New England are kind of different cases. Philadelphia, we all talked to, we've separately recorded our picks videos and our breakdowns. We both like the Giants and the points in this game. Philadelphia makes sense in some entries, though, from a game theory perspective at reasonably low ownership. They are on that Black Friday game. They also could be the most popular. They almost certainly will be more popular than Chiefs and way more popular than Lions. So they're probably going to be simply okay EV-wise, and possibly a team you might want to be off of. You also may want to have them and just get through. So I'm not saying, but I'm saying if you have a lot of Thanksgiving options, Philadelphia kind of ticks like a contrarian play kind of way to go if you have plenty of options on Thanksgiving. I'd probably rather use them than Baltimore right now, of the two, from a game theory perspective, and be more willing to come back with Baltimore on Thanksgiving. I'm not saying you have to pick them. I'm just saying I think that's the logic. The other spot for Philadelphia would be Week 15, other than Black Friday, when they host the Raiders. But now, because they didn't win, they haven't been as good, I think there's a possibility they're really popular that week. And so then the question is, do you want to be on a popular pick? But they are probably going to be a fairly popular pick on Week 15 against the Raiders for those that don't use them on Thanksgiving. New England, I think it's an okay spot, right? If you want to advance the entry and you like New England here, it's not a smash spot. There are other spots you could also use them. It's also one that I think it's not a great EV play, but again, and that's because of the Colts, and that's because of the Chiefs. So you have two really high favorites that are drawing enough popularity away that you don't have this like huge possibility of benefiting from one or two big upsets. I guess Atlanta would be the one if that number comes in close to 25%. So New England's just an okay play. They're solid. I think you could use them if you're like, you know what, I want to save Kansas City for the holiday. I don't have the Colts, so I'm willing to use New England instead because I think that's justifiable. I think they're they're in consideration. If you also want to say Philadelphia, if you don't want to deal with Buffalo, Baltimore, because I'd rather use New England than Tampa, teams down there. And if you decide you want to fade Atlanta, Cincy on popularity grounds to try to have, upsets there be the reason this pool gets chopped this week, New England would be a one to fall back to.
Yeah, for sure. And before we get out here, do you want to give a couple thoughts on Grandissimo, which is whittled down to not a ton of entries? I don't remember exactly where it was the last time I checked. I think
We are
like
at 15, and that's where we were last week. Last week, I think 12 picked the Chiefs. One got through with that Denver miracle. So everybody survived. And one of the three that didn't pick the Chiefs last week had also already used them. So there's only 2 entries that have Kansas City. There are 9, I believe, that have the Colts available. 1 entry has both the Colts and the Chiefs available. So we start there. I think in that contest, we've seen the last two touchdown favorites draw over 80% of picks. Draw 80%. Nearly all the picks, allowing people to be solo on other options and have high EV. It didn't work out that way. Everybody advanced for the most part. But we've seen that. Well, you can't have that situation. At most, you can have 9 on the Colts. That's 60%. And I think there's a pretty good argument if I'm the guy holding the entries, the entry and the people holding the Colts and Chiefs. I know the Chiefs have more future value, but I think I use the Chiefs. I think I use the Chiefs in a spot where at most I'm with one other person on a 12.5 point favorite. That's the place you want to be in a contest like this. So I think I fire it, right? Because otherwise you're probably waiting until Thanksgiving and beyond. And so why not use them? And then the Chiefs are out of the contest. They're just not going to decide Grandissimo if it doesn't happen this week. I probably use the Chiefs, so that means maybe 8 people use the Colts. Well, that's just over half. I think at just over half, the Colts are still a solid play. They aren't a smash play, but at a 2 touchdown favorite, they're a solid advance me play. And then where do the other 5 go? That's where I think the interesting one. If you don't have either of them, who do you go with? That's where I think it gets interesting because I think your goal is to be what we've seen the last few weeks, solo on the team. Well, who are you likely to get solo on? Are people going to gravitate, more than one person going to gravitate to Atlanta? Will anybody pick Philadelphia? Will people, so that's where I think the strategy comes in. But I think if you're thinking about it and you're one of those 5, you're just you don't want to go too far down the odds board and you're trying to guess where can I be alone where I'm off that team. And if there is a massive upset, I'm positioned as the only one on this team, and maybe I benefit. So that's how I think you would try to think about it, is where can I get solo? Can I do that with Atlanta, Cincinnati, New England, Philadelphia? Those are probably mostly your choices. I think most people that have Buffalo will save them.
Yep. And absolutely, that was a great breakdown of the Grandissimo and just kind of small pool logic in general as well. So if you found this episode helpful, go ahead and give us a like and subscribe. It makes us know that you really value this content, that you appreciate it, helps us continue to provide that to you. If you want more NFL Week 8 Circa Survivor strategy, click the link below where I will link Jason's write-up for this week. As I mentioned before, you can get a 3-day free trial that will also be in the description below to check all that out and all the tools that we have on site. Circa Survivor and a regular NFL Survivor tool, football pick'em, betting picks, everything, you name it. You can check all that out below. So with that, good luck in Circa Survivor week number 8.